Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I think we're just waiting for a few more people to join us. We'll maybe give them another 30 seconds. Right, I think the numbers have stopped going up. So I'd like to just introduce myself. I'm Jane Lycett. I'm the Senior Market Advisor for Agriculture in Enterprise Ireland's UK team. And in the next hour, we have a really great lineup of speakers. And the reason for putting on this webinar is really to provide some insights into the way the sustainability agenda is shaping British farming, which in turn impacts on the way farmers operate. And ultimately, if we get right down to brass tacks and thinking about doing business with them, the type of products and services farmers will be looking for to assist them in running their sustainable businesses. So I'll just quickly run through the speakers before handing over to them. First up, we'll have Simon Thelwell, who's the Strategic Director of Harper Adams University School of Sustainable Food and Farming, who's working with a broad range of farmers, retailers and others in the supply chain. And then we'll pass over to Simon's colleague, Lucy Bates, who will be talking about her role managing the sustainable farm networks. And then we'll hear an Enterprise Ireland client case study about how engaging with a UK farm network can actually work in practice. And that will be with Brendan Allen, co-founder of Senus, talking about Senus's experience of collaborating with the Farming Connect network in Wales. And next up, we'll have some insights from Joseph Keating, Senior Agriculture and Fisheries Manager at the Co-op. And there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end, so feel free to pop your questions in the chat, and my colleague Alice will keep an eye on those. The webinar will be recorded and will be available to you all afterwards. And there will actually be a little bonus feature added to the recording, which will be a pre-recorded video from Professor David Rose from Harper Adams University on farmer behaviour change and technology adoption and how to develop tech with farmers. Now, ironically enough, David is actually being borrowed by University College Dublin today, so can't be with us, but it's great to see that collaboration between the universities. And I know Simon will mention the strong links that Harper Adams has with Ireland and has had for well over a century. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to you, Simon, and then Lucy can follow straight on from there.
Okay, thank you, Jane. I'll just try and get my presentation working properly. Give me a second. Okay, can I just check, Jane, that you can see the slides okay?
Yep, all good.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, firstly, thank you, Jane, and to the Enterprise Ireland team for the invitation to speak to you this afternoon. It's a great privilege to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you really on two fronts from my point of view. I'm Simon Thelwell. I'm the Strategic Director of the School of Sustainable Food and Farming, which is a Harper Adams initiative. And I'm going to talk to you firstly a little bit about Harper Adams. I'm sure many of you are aware of Harper Adams and have even been to Harper Adams, been there as a student or worked with Harper in the past. But for those of you who haven't, I'll do a very short introduction, and then I'll do another sort of a brief introduction to the School of Sustainable Food and Farming, which is an initiative that the university has engaged with to support sustainability across agriculture. So I'm going to talk to you across those two fronts. So firstly, I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief introduction to Harper. So, I mean, Harper Adams, as I've said, many of you will know who and what Harper Adams is. It's the largest land-based university across the UK. Currently has around 5,500 students. And I was actually a student at Harper Adams back in the early 90s, and we had 800 students. So it's seen significant growth over that period, which is great to see. 3 years ago, we had a new CEO and Vice Chancellor in Ken Sloan, who has really started to think about what a land-based education looks like and has put forward a new strategic direction for the university, which I'll just cover briefly, but you're more than welcome to have a look at that on our website as well. So essentially, it focuses very much on food production, focuses on technology, animal health and sustainable living environments. And of course, as most organisations, we have a mission, which is to inspire and equip learners to deliver real change, building sustainable futures for our living planet by working collaboratively on practical research, innovation and new technologies. And so that's the mission statement for the university. And within the different departments of the university, we focus very much on focusing in on that mission and working very practically and applied across our different departments. Agriculture is by far still the largest course and cohort at Harper Adams with over 200 students. But we have a whole range of different courses now at the university, as you can see there, ranging from science, technology, engineering, business, food, the environment, veterinary science, sustainability, digital data, property and retail management. So there's a real sort of mix of courses at the university, but like we said, very much focused on the land-based sector, which is great. We also have a really significant research team now at the university with a number of professors, senior academics working on a range of different research areas. And there's a few of them mentioned on here, but we really are focusing in and drilling into what sustainability means across the agricultural and food landscape. Whether it is looking at the impacts of livestock, whether it's looking at land use, whether it's looking at soils, whether it's looking at pests, and increasingly whether it's looking at green energy, renewables, etc. So a real range of sort of research strengths that we have within the university. And of course, how is that measured? Well, it's measured in lots of different ways, but there's a number of different metrics that the university uses to look at its performance. And it significantly, outperforms and performs really well in a number of those metrics. And I guess the one that we're sort of most proud of is the graduate employment metric, which is an independent metric coming from Graduate Outcomes, with 97.5% of all of our graduates ending up in employment or further study when they finish university, which is a fantastic metric. And one actually that's only really beaten by a number of the medical colleges. So as a university, we are incredibly proud of that. We're also one of the only universities, perhaps one of the only main agricultural universities still to have, be based on a campus university right in the heart of our university farm, and we're very, very proud of that. And that affords us to have a number of different facilities and I guess groupings where we can actually focus in on specific research aspects. Whether it's around agri-tech, whether it's our future farm, whether it's around veterinary education, whether it's around teaching and learning, whether it's around entomology and food. There's a whole range of different research groups that we have at Harper, which enable us to use the university farm to the best of its ability. And of course, to get students out of the classroom straight onto the farm, just within a few minutes. So just in terms briefly of the university farm, like I said, there's not many agricultural institutions left that still have such a large farm run on a very commercial basis, which enables our students to get a very applied view of what happens, both from a theoretical point of view, from a research point of view, but also from a practical farming point of view. And also, as a farm, Ken Sloan has been very, very, proactive about maintaining the range of livestock and arable enterprises that the farm has, because a number of farms have taken decisions to take out certain enterprises, but we're very, very thankful that Ken is very positive about having sheep, having pigs, having dairy, having beef, having a whole range of arable cropping and looking at new sort of sustainable arable cropping as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And this slide just gives you a view, I guess, a little bit of a perspective of the size of one side of the road of Harper Adams University, where you can see on there the dairy units and the range of agricultural buildings that we have, ranging from the pigs, the beef and sheep, and the dairy herd as well. And of course, Harper has a really long-standing relationship with the island of Ireland, which is fantastic. Ken informs me that our first student, as Jane mentioned, came across from Ireland in 1902, and that really has grown very significantly since then. And Harper Adams has like I said, a real sort of affinity with the island of Ireland, with the Irish students. We have a number of scholarships which Irish students are very the uptake of which is significant. We also have 140 members of the Harper Island Society, which is really fantastic, and host a whole range of different events across the year. And also we have great relationships into the Irish agri-food sector as well. And Ken has set up recently something he's called a Task and Finish group, where he's really looking at how we can deepen those relationships with the agri-food sector across Ireland. And I would say that if you are interested in that, we'd be very happy to talk to you about that further as well. And I believe, Jane, that Ken is also visiting Ireland fairly soon, isn't he? I think in about a month's time. And we'll be visiting a range of different academic institutions and businesses as well. So that was a very sort of brief introduction to Harper. I'm just going to give you an overview now of the School of Sustainable Food and Farming. So the School of Sustainable Food and Farming was something that we created about 3 years ago now. And really it was about how we could look at sustainability across agriculture with, I guess, an acceptance that a number of the elements that we were talking about are sort of pre-competitive. There's a whole range of different aspects to sustainability in agriculture, which many businesses, organizations face and have very similar challenges and also very similar sort of potential opportunities as well. And I guess the school was created really, as you might imagine from a university perspective, to provide that sort of academic rigor, that training, that knowledge transfer around sustainability and what that actually means from businesses' perspective, but also practically from obviously the farmers that are involved in many of our supply chains. And that's really how the school came about. It was initially funded by Morrison's, McDonald's and the National Farmers Union. They were our sort of what we call our founding partners or our founding funders. And they put some money in initially to get the school going, but we work with a whole range of different businesses, organizations across the whole agriculture sector now. And you know, many of our projects encompass the whole supply chain, working both from farmers right the way through processors, manufacturers, and through to retailers. And I guess there was a number of sort of key drivers that made the school, you know, something that it is, and actually drove its strategy. And a number of those areas were really around, you know, making sure that we can't wait for government intervention in a lot of cases. That, you know, there was a realization, I guess, that many of the supply chains across our industry were driving that agenda, having their own corporate targets around net zero, their own corporate targets around sustainability, what they wanted to achieve. Many of them had sort of, well, and there are across the sector many different dates in terms of targets, whether it's 2030, 2040 or 2050. And I guess, you know, one of the realizations really from our point of view at Harper was that lots of farmers were sort of not necessarily confused by all of this, but, you know, there was a lot of people talking about it. A lot of people had different views about it. A lot of people had different strategies. And I guess one of the key challenges for the school was to try and cut through some of that noise and enable us to work with our farmers more strategically and provide that sort of trusted advice that farmers really need in this space. There's also, you know, a huge realization that, you know, a lot of farmers are doing some great work with their retailer aligned supply chains or with their suppliers. But there's actually a huge number of farmers out there that are not part of those retail supply chains. And we were very conscious of that. And we wanted to make sure that, you know, not only did we support those businesses which were aligned to our retailers, but also we managed to get some of those farmers that are not, some of those beef and sheep farmers particularly, potentially that are supplying into the local auction marts, but one of the real areas that we've been working hard to try and address. And who is the SSFF? Well, you know, we are here to equip farmers with skills, knowledge and training around sustainability. We are here to provide that sort of trusted source to try and demystify what we mean by sustainability. We're here to help farmers and organizations to think about how we measure, report and verify against carbon emissions, whether that's gross emissions, whether that's sequestration. You know, that's really, really important if we're going to see change across our industry. We're also here, obviously, as a university to support the next generation, the new entrants into our food and drink industry, and to try and, you know, identify and find those entrepreneurial group of next gen, you know, those people that are potentially going to run our businesses in the future, and, you know, try and encourage them to think about agriculture and the food industry as a real opportunity in terms of where they focus their careers. And I guess, we're a community of organizations. We work, collaboratively. You'll see the little plus logo across Harper Adams, and that really is about working collaboratively with industry, working with different organizations who have the strengths to deliver, a productive and profitable agricultural industry that we all want to see. So just briefly, we work across 4 pillars. We work, and this really focuses the driver of our work, the drivers of our work. So we focus on what we call new talents. So as I've mentioned, thinking about that next generation, we work with our existing farmers, whether they are part of a supply chain, an integrated supply chain, maybe working with a supplier or a retailer. We have a large number of research projects where we work collaboratively with industry who have certain challenges and issues and opportunities that they want to investigate. And we also have an influence pillar. So we work very closely with the National Farmers Union and others. We're not a lobby organisation, but we do have the opportunity through myself and senior members of the Harper Adams team to work across industry and also across government as well. And I guess, briefly, just why are we here? I think, there are lots of challenges with agriculture, but there are also lots of opportunities. But I think, there's a realization, and there has been for many years, that, agriculture is, it contributes around 10 to 12% of greenhouse gas emissions across the UK. Other sectors are decarbonising very quickly. So, if we look at that chart on the right-hand side, things like energy production has decarbonised rapidly over the last 30 years. Whereas we look at agriculture, if you can see on the screen that green bar across the bottom, there has been reductions in agriculture around 12% between 1990 and 2021, but it stayed pretty static. And I guess, what's the challenge of that? Well, as other sectors decarbonise, will agriculture become more of an issue for governments, both in the UK and across the globe? And I guess, we need to therefore think about our industry, think about our contribution to things like greenhouse gas emissions, and think about ways that we can actively start to consider reduction of those. Where do we work? We tend to work, as I've mentioned, across what we call our scope 3 emissions. We work very much with our suppliers and our producers and our retailers, very much focusing on their farm-based supply chains, looking at contributions from raw materials into their supply chains. And I guess most of our activity is focused with farmers within those supply chains. And, there is lots of challenges, as I've said. There's also lots of legislation that we need to be aware of. Things like the greenhouse gas protocol and the land sector removals guidance documents from greenhouse gas protocol, which are going to come out later this year, are all things that are influencing our organisation. And I guess I just wanted to also touch on, those things that are influencing us. Also we have to consider, our financial organisations and our investors as well, because a number of them, in terms of our work in that sort of growing sort of area of who has influence and the ability to shape our future. Particularly if we're looking at investment, where farmers have to invest significant amount of money, maybe to think about a challenge around sustainability that they want to address. The banks specifically, are focusing a lot of attention on what does sustainability look like, and what does it look like from a project perspective, or investment perspective. So farmers are thinking about investing in significant projects. How does that lending support sustainability? And an increasing number of them are really considering how those projects will can be looked at from a sustainability perspective and their impact on the environment. There's also a number of global corporate disclosure organizations now that have come along, where they're looking at carbon. It's not all about carbon, but there are specific ones looking specifically at that in terms of measurements. There's a lot of talk around sustainable soya, and so the EUDR regulation, which is coming into force later this year, will have some significant impact on that. And then, a lot of the banking organisations and corporates are starting to look at the Task Force for Nature-Rated Financial Disclosures. And I just wanted to focus on that just for 1 second, because I've done some work on this recently with one of our banks, and it's quite interesting when we start to think about our impact and our business impacts on the environment. And I guess the LEAP assessment that the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosure is quite a good one just to consider in terms of your impact if you haven't looked at this already. And essentially what that's looking at is how we look at our interface with nature as a business, how we evaluate those dependencies on some of the supply chains that we might have, how we assess the risks of those, and then also how we report against that, whether it's from a risk management or a governance or a strategy perspective. And the reason why I put this slide up is because this is used for organizations across the globe, whether they're involved in agriculture or food or not. But one of the things that I just want to draw your attention to, on the bottom half of this slide, we've got disclosure metrics. And agriculture is mentioned specifically. So it's really important when we think about our impacts and our business impacts on the environment that we are actually considering agriculture and food as a real key component of that. And that's really important just to consider. And I guess, the other thing to consider as well is that this is used from a lot of banking and banks' perspectives. So agriculture is quite high on their agenda. Briefly, just, what are our retailers doing about this? And I know Joseph will talk about this, I'm sure, a lot more when we speak to him. But this was just a summary of a number of our key retailers. And I guess, some of the codes and the various different voluntary codes that they may have signed up to, which is great. This is, I guess, a double-edged sword. It's really great to see all of our retailers signing up to a number of these different aspects and codes. But I guess it's what happens next, and it's also the impact that has on the supply chains, which is really important just to consider. So, how do we then take some of these things like the Soy Manifesto or our SBTIs, and then how does that relate from that retailer's perspective down onto our farmer-based supply chains? And I guess that's where the School of Sustainable Food and Farming comes in terms of helping those retailers and key suppliers to identify that if we want to actually work towards these different codes, and a lot of them are voluntary at the moment, but they may well become more regulatory in the future. What's the impact of those signing up to those codes on those farmers, and how can we practically help them to do that, which is really important. And then just finally on this is the Food Data Transparency Partnership, which some of you might be aware of, some of you might have heard of, but really this is really looking towards trying to find consistent, accurate quantification of the agri-food industry from a data perspective, from a reporting perspective, and a number of our organizations from our food and farming corporates and businesses are heavily involved in this. And it's great to see that there's a lot of collaboration around this as well in terms of how we actually drive this forward, because that is really important. Data on farm, is one of those things that we need, but how we use it, how we measure it, and how farmers get value from it is also really important to understand. So that's the Food Data Transparency Partnership. And I guess, why is all this important? Well, if we've got products or services that we're looking to sell into agriculture, we've got multiple different agendas. Yes, we're trying to produce great foods, but we've also got a number of different drivers that are also affecting farmers. Whether that's soil health, whether it's about sequestration of carbon, whether it's about water quality, whether it's about biodiversity, and it's also about trying to generate profit and investment for the future. So farms have really got a lot of different agendas, a lot of different pressures. And I guess, if we're organizations looking to sell into those, it's really important that we understand those pressures and understand what farmers are really up against. And I guess their acceptability of new technology or new ways of doing things is also really important. So, one of the things that I've mentioned so far is about reporting. It tends to get talked about quite a lot, whether we're reporting from a corporate point of view or a business point of view. But actually, there are multiple different benefits other than just reporting, from a sort of regulation or legislation point of view. And there's a couple of them on the screen here. But, if we're looking at sustainable supply chains, it's really important because we need to understand about how we can build resilience into our supply chains, which has sort of risen up the agenda recently with things like, geopolitical issues, weather issues. They're all really important. How we can deliver benefits for nature, which are also, super important. And then also how we can work more collaboratively across our supply chains. And all of that, of course, is leading to the Paris Climate Agreement, where we're looking to reduce global warming. So, there are lots of benefits around sustainability other than just thinking about, okay, well, how does our business report sustainable, our sustainable supply chains, for more sort of legislative reasons. And so I guess, the important bit from this group's point of view is how we engage with farmers. So from the school's point of view, it's really important for us that, resilient supply chains start with resilient farmers. And as I've mentioned, it's important for us that farmers are not also thinking about sustainability from, the environmental perspective, but also thinking about it from the economic perspective. We often say that farmers can't invest in sustainability if they're not economically viable, and that really is important. One of the areas that we focus on within the school is around co-development of ideas. Lucy Bates, who will talk to you in a minute, is really an example of this. How we can design, an initiative which is co-designed by the industry, because that's really important if we're going to share value, share risk, share engagement, and ultimately, if we haven't engaged with the supply chain from start to finish, it's not great in terms of how we might see success. So in terms of co-designing that's really important to try and make sure we improve that likelihood of success. And then another area that the school focuses on is really about how we measure, how we report, and how we verify change. So it's great, isn't it, to think about lots of different farmers doing lots of different things, but actually, how do we aggregate that data? How do we pull that data together? How do we verify that data in order to demonstrate to governments, in order to demonstrate to our retailers that change is actually practically happening? But I guess, there's a couple of different things in here. Farmers, like I've said, have got so many challenges that they face that, when we talk about sustainability, or it could be about adoption of technology, it's really important to understand the benefit and value to farmers, and also, how we incentivize those farmers as well. And then just briefly, we call it the 6 I's for success at the school. It's about thinking about your farmers in terms of their acceptability of adoption of change or adoption of sustainability. We can interchange those words. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to either inspire them, we're trying to understand from their perspective what the next stage of innovation looks like on farms. We're there to provide information. We're there to support key levels of implementation, which is often the most challenging, but often the most important. And then there's two just sitting off to the side there around, like I've mentioned previously, incentives and benefits to those farmers. So, at the moment, a lot of farmers do say, well, why should I change? Why is it important to think about sustainable agricultural systems? And a lot of that can come back to, okay, what's the incentive of doing that? And also what's the wider benefits of doing that? And then we have a final 6th I, which we call intimidation. And that's really important. Sometimes it's great to take farmers to the best farmer in the country and to show them the biggest kits and the shiniest buildings and the huge chunks of concrete. But actually, sometimes that can intimidate farmers. And what we're very conscious of with the school is that we actually, if we do show farmers businesses and farms, that they are farms that they can relate to. That's really important, that they can actually see change happening on a farm or a family farm, and make sure that they can work with those farmers to improve their own businesses. And just, a couple of initiatives are our Future Farmer Programme. We work with Tesco, where we take 75 young people every year through a sustainability change programme, which has worked really well for the last 2 years. We're just about to take our 3rd cohort of 75 young people through that. So if your organisations have anyone who has an interest in sustainability and change management, our applications are currently open for that at the moment. And then more recently at the Oxford Farming Conference, we launched the Green Print for UK Farming, where we had 250 farmers from the Tesco supply chains, which we worked with both online in terms of a survey and in person in terms of some focus groups, and really tried to understand what their sort of challenges were around engaging and delivering sustainability. And these were some of the recommendations that came from that. So things like, setting a clear vision, making sure they have access to innovative technology, the ability to attract future talents, financial certainty, and standardizing data and insight were some of the key sort of recommendations that came from that report. And like I said, across the industry, we're engaging with a number of different suppliers and retailers in order to support them with, I guess, their own drivers, aims, and ambitions. But also, for us, it's very important to say that we work very, very closely with the farmers involved in these supply chains. So, yes, it's brilliant for us that we are able to engage with our retailers and suppliers in terms of looking at what they want to try and achieve with their farmers. But actually that interpretation then down to the farming community is really important, and how we do that is one of the most important aspects of that. And we're very proud of that as well as a school and university. So I'm just going to hand over now to Lucy Bates. Lucy is our project manager for the Sustainable Farm Network. It's really, Lucy will give us a really good insight and introduction to it. We really focused in on the idea of farm demonstrations, the championing of farm demonstration, the importance of farm demonstration across the UK. We had an official launch of it in November last year at the House of Lords. We have, I guess, a really great co-design aspect to it, in terms we have a steering group and we have a network stewards group. The steering group for the Sustainable Farm Networks is chaired by John Gilliland, who I'm sure will be known to many of you. But I'm going to hand over to Lucy now, who will take us through the next section. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, Lucy. I think you might just be on mute.
There we go. Can I check that's working okay for you all as far as seeing it goes?
Good. Yep, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Simon. And just great to put in context the work that I'm doing, which is one project among many as part of School Sustainable Food and Farming. I joined Simon's team a bit more than just over a year ago now. So we're a year into the first 3 years of the Sustainable Farm Networks initiative, which I'm going to give you a bit more background on now. Essentially, this is our core mission for the Sustainable Farm Networks. It's working with diverse demonstration farm networks. So really conscious, as I'm sure many of you will be aware and will be working or will have worked either as farmers or as suppliers, the groups of farmers who are doing something differently, and are taking note of what happens and have an interest in sharing the results, and a real consciousness that across the landscape in the UK, there's some amazing work going on, but at times that might be work in common that's not necessarily in communication. So really the intention of the Sustainable Farm Networks initiative is to provide a system agnostic pre-competitive forum for those networks to find common ground and work together where appropriate. Sharing experiences, findings and best practice, how we like to put it. The real driver for the project coming to pass was this report. I'll share these slides afterwards via you, Jane, and there's actually a link on here if you'd like to look at the report itself. Chaired by Lord Curry and published in 2022. It was a real cross-sector feat of conversation and involvement, with 17 co-authors ultimately, and 9 recommendations came out of this report. And really the one that our initiative speaks to is that national coordination of demonstration farms throughout the UK should be encouraged. Their knowledge and experience should be shared and easily accessible. And importantly, speaking to the university aspect of Harper and how it sits with us, those higher education institution farm-based assets should be an important aspect of this cooperative setting. So who are these diverse demonstration farm networks? What are they made out of? And really, this is not a finite list, but this is kind of the ballpark that we came up with on conversation with our stakeholders, with some of those existing networks that we're part of or that we know of or have worked with in the past. And we really found that this range included supply chain pioneers and pilots, benchmarking groups, some of which very sector specific, the assurance scheme flagship farms, research networks are an important bringing together of farms to implement change, measure the outcomes and share that information. The levy body networks, knowledge exchange platforms and resource repositories are places where already diverse farms and networks may come together to share notes. And of course, the university and college farms, so those higher education institution land-based assets mentioned in the recommendation, which from the perspective of this project really has a starting point and a basal node with Landex, who are a particular grouping of higher education institutions who work closely together and who run an existing sustainable farm network, whereby those the managers of those university farms come together to build on their collective experience and resource. I think Simon's touched on this in his presentation, and I'm conscious this will be very much part of your work across the board, not to be caught in a carbon tunnel. That their integrated sustainability parameters without each other are fairly meaningless. So really keeping that in lens at all times. We've got this resilient productivity, which is a really kind of core uniting factor, I would say, and my understanding is, and my experience is, of the commercial farming sector, that resilient productivity. You can't be green if you're in the red. Of course, carbon capture on farm, reduce it, which ties in, of course, to reducing and refining inputs, soil health, biodiversity, green energy, healthy communities, the people part of what good looks like. And what did we offer? What have we been looking to put together over this first year and a bit of the Sustainable Farm Networks Initiative, as we've worked with existing demonstrators to identify what's currently missing, what's of interest, what could be done better, and really kind of making a resolution to build on existing work, not look to reinvent the wheel, work with existing knowledge exchange platforms and resource repositories, and be need-led. So signposting to existing resources, as well as adding where we can and supporting collaboratively those organisations who are already doing great work in this area. Champion network successes, so both to the wider farming community, but also where appropriate to policy, to underline the real importance and the viability, the critical nature of how on-farm demonstration supports practice change on farm, and those sometimes difficult, sometimes complicated, often complicated transitions towards more sustainable practices that may have costs and there may be payoffs, but really highlighting where the benefits lie and what kind of a risk and opportunity lies therein. And matchmaking and facilitating data pooling where appropriate. So as Simon mentioned, the importance of being able to compare like with like when we're looking at a wider picture for benchmarking and measuring progress, how we can bring together those who are measuring their own progress and have that data presented in such a way that it's more meaningful for covering a greater area. And importantly, it's in bold because this really is the kind of most important practical one foot in front of the other aspect of this this work at the moment, which is network stewards support and networking. So working very much through network stewards, so those individuals who've built those relationships with farmers who are coordinating and facilitating the implementation and the monitoring of findings and the sharing of information. So, we had to think quite carefully and have a think, what do we mean by demonstration farm network? And we kind of came out with a definition. It's 3 or more farm businesses. It's a maker network, and that they're coordinating activities to implementing common farming practices, principles, or technologies that address all these areas of sustainability, and they have the intention of monitoring those findings and sharing that information. And that network steward role felt really important to hammer out and to sort of be clear and honest that was our point of contact. And that is the individuals with the most direct and consistent contact with network members. So far, I'm really excited to be able to say, as of this morning, when I checked my emails on coming back from holiday, we now have 32 networks. We had 31 when I left before Easter, and that's over 2,400 demo farm contact points. Slight caveat here, some of those will be multiple, some farms will be a leaf demonstration farm, will also be an FAI grazing farm, may also be a Tesco Future Farmer alumni. So that's not necessarily 2,462 distinct farms, but 2,462 interfaces between a farm and a demonstration project. And between them, that's 405,000 odd hectare, which is quite a cool stat, I think. So give an idea of the real variety, the diversity that lies within, which for me is a really key aspect of this. Everybody already knows someone. We're not the first people to think about this is a bright idea to share notes and to share experiences. But really no one knows everyone. So this spread of enterprise types, sustainability focus areas, and importantly, location of holdings across the 4 nations of the UK. This is a real great slide for me to see that we've achieved this level of diversity at this point in the project. And this is our current membership. So I am confident that there will be multiple connections here with probably some of your farm contacts already. I would be surprised if most of you didn't in some way work with at least one farm who were represented across at least one of these networks. I noticed we've got the Farming Connect network here, which I think we're going to hear more about the experience of shortly. And we've got a huge range from farmer-led supply chain pioneers. We've got retailers, we've got processors, we've got university groupings. We've got a real spread from sort of the deep agroecological, the small-scale horticultural, peri-urban aspect of things, right through to the really quite broad-scale productivity-focused networks and everything in between. Happy to chat further with you if of interest. I'm fairly easy to find, and happy to circulate these slides to you following this meeting, probably via Jane. So I'll stop sharing.
Many thanks, Lucy. That's great. Thank you. And that's my homework, to go and research all of those farm networks and see what they're all about. And quickly moving on now to Brendan, the co-founder of Senus, to talk to us about his experience of working with one of those networks, Farming Connect in Wales.
Thanks a million, Jane. I'm just checking that screen share is working there.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah, I won't keep you too long because I know we're on a hard deadline at half 3 for our main speaker at the end. So what I'll do is I'll just give you a brief overview of our company and our experience in the UK to date. So we're an Irish-based company based born out of the University of Galway on the west coast of Ireland. So we were Irish dominant for the first 3 to 4 years, and now we're growing rapidly in the UK as well. To give you an idea of flavour of what we are, so you'll hear Simon, he said the word MRV. So we're a software platform that provides MRV, so measurement, reporting and verification for natural capital. So soils, habitats, water quality, and we do this for the land use sector. So it's not just agriculture, but agriculture is the biggest user of land. We work with local authorities and different organisations, but agriculture is the most dominant customer of ours. To give you an idea of how we do this, so we've built a platform, it's geospatial mapping-based platform, and we use 3 specific data sets to give insights to our customers. Number 1 is the data that already exists. So every country has a huge amount of geospatial data, be it soil map, water quality maps. We'll first digitize that onto our platform. Then we'll use in-field data, so the ability to collect data in the field, be it a habitat score, a soil sample. And we're also developing machine learning geospatial models. So this is to use the data you've collected to train up models to actually predict things like soil carbon, help you predict habitat sort of quality as well. So between those 3 data sets, a lot of our companies have amassed huge amount of information from within their supply chain. And we do this for soil health, soil carbon, habitats and water quality. To give you an idea of, we are 1.7 million hectares under management on our platform across 16 countries. This map is quite flattering in that we are very dominant in Ireland, the UK, and then we've a few projects going across, but they're growing rapidly. So our technology is used across Europe. And we work with the supply chain. So we don't work directly with farmers. We'll work with dairy processors, some supermarkets, and we work in partnership with a lot of data providers. So it'd be the soil labs, or as I said, national data sets. So in Ireland, we'd have a full API integration with things like the National Parks and Wildlife, EPA, and then we use remote sensing from Copernicus satellites. But to give you an idea then on, that's just a little bit about us for context, but I want to just give you some quick insights in about 2 or 3 minutes into what we've seen in the market to date. And for those of you that are just getting into the UK market, here's the way we've done it. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but the first thing we've done is we started landscaping the market. And that means getting out, getting on the ground, meeting as many people as you can, just pure exploration, attend all the exhibitions, have as many conversations as you can, and then identify all stakeholders. And then we hired into the markets. We have people on the ground there, and Imogen, one of the people, is on this call with us. From all that, we build a strategy for the UK market, and I'm going to show you the outcome of that strategy and the key insights we've learned. Some people like to build their strategy and then do all the other stuff. We want to do exploration first, because that informs a more accurate strategy. But to give you an idea around from sustainability, which is the sector we're in, but not fully reliant on, from what we've seen so far, and Ireland, the UK, and across Europe, this is kind of the standard that we're seeing. There's still a lot of uncertainty at market level, or at the ground level, with sustainability. So that's not, it comes across as a reluctance. Farmers know they need to change, but there's a lot of different programs, a lot of different concepts, a lot of different standards been put in front of people. So it creates a lot of flux. And that's why it's important that Simon and Lucy are putting initiatives together to actually take a lot of that flux out of the market. By far the most dominant thing that we see is that the supply chains are really complex. So we would be speaking to heads of sustainability in various companies, and they will be getting whiter in their hair every time you meet them, because they're trying to solve what is nearly an unsolvable problem for them, because there's so many different things. Even Simon and Lucy would show you there the amount of different things at scope 3 that they have to try and deliver. The success we've had to date, so we have about 5 or 6 good quality contracts on the ground in the UK. It's very much about market relationships. So be a supermarket or a processor. So a big name with a big name, they're trying to get initiatives off the ground. It's either that or government. So Farming Connect will be very much the government side of things. They're the 2 big drivers of programs when it comes to sustainability. Biggest insight I can give you is technology versus adoption. You may have the best technology in the world, but if it's not being adopted at farm level, it's of no use to you or to the market. Technology is far ahead of adoption. Adoption at farm level is much slower. And this is not UK, this is Ireland, this is across Europe. And we've seen that. So we focus in our design as much on adoption as we do on technology, because technology can do a mass of things for agriculture, but the adoption is the barrier. And then the other insight that we got, and this is something to bear in mind, is if you have a compliance and an efficiency value proposition, that's a really important co-benefit to have when you're approaching these companies. What that means is, can you save a farmer money? If you can do that and it has a sustainable outcome, you have a much bigger chance at success. What that looks like for us is we offer soil health programs. So we help organizations build large-scale data around soil health across their supply chains. This helps farmers be more precise around their fertilizer applications, bring down the fertilizer costs. That has the co-benefit of water quality, has the co-benefit of bringing down the overall carbon footprint of the farm. That's what I mean by efficiency. And then if you're satisfying a compliance need as well, that's a great benefit. I won't take up too much more of your time, but just to give you an idea of this project in 1 minute. So we've been working with Farming Connect for the last number of years. And this is very much discovering a value proposition in what we've been doing. So they're an organisation based out of Wales. They're government funded, and their job is very like Teagasc in Ireland. It has some research, but it's a lot of knowledge transfer. It's a lot of programs on the ground with farmers. And they would be doing a lot of it through standard manual processes that we would have seen. So this is a great example of starting small and growing. We got in with Farming Connection with one person who wanted to just speed up the way they were doing soil sampling and the way they were doing in-field assessments. It's what our technology is the perfect MRV for them. So it actually brings that value proposition. But really it was about efficiency, quality control of the data, and doing that at a low cost or a reasonable cost. But we went from getting them to try it, test it, and they saw the value there. That led to a contract, and now that's leading to scale. So we're actually having conversations with them around larger government level contracts. But the big thing is the efficiency or some sort of co-benefit is what got us there, not just the standard MRV approach. They're getting that anyway, but it's actually speeding them up when they're working in field as well. So I promised you I keep it under 10 minutes. So I leave it at that, and I'll pass over to Joseph and Jane again. So thanks a million.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Brendan. And you were sparing Joseph the grilling I was going to give him, because we're now running slightly short of time. But if I can move on to Joseph now, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background, and then an overview of the co-op and your current role as the Senior Agriculture and Fisheries Manager. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you. I think I met you a number of years ago, Brendan. I've definitely done grayer since as well. So I'd yeah, so well, you can guess by my accent, originally from Galway. In terms of agriculture, for those that know the agricultural colleges, grew up beside the Franciscan Brothers, Montpellier Agricultural College. So I'm a neighbour. But been in the UK now going on 15 years. Starting off with a union, farming union, so the National Farmers Union, then doing knowledge exchange, managing the knowledge exchange managers within the levy board, and then now moved to the co-op. So within the co-op, I'm responsible for all farming and fisheries from a supply level. And I suppose the two main pillars within that is animal welfare, our standards, our sourcing standards, and what we comply against, but also sustainability, especially in these last 5-6 years, is a priority. Those involved in sustainability, retail, if you look at our footprint, 70-90% is from the food we sell. And out of that, beef, lamb and dairy make up a significant proportion. So a lot of the work I'm doing is coordinating our strategy and projects to kind of reduce our impact and work with our farmers and suppliers.
Okay, and the co-op was really proud of the fact that they source all their fresh and frozen meat from British farms and demand the highest welfare standards, alongside a wider commitment to sustainability and responsible sourcing. What practical steps do you and your team take to make sure these high standards are kept by the work that you do with the farmers in co-op supply chain?
Yeah, so we do have have for a number of years strong British credentials. That's predominantly backed up by our choice of assurance schemes. So probably equivalent to Bord Bia, but Red Tractor is heavily used in co-op. We also use RSPCA for outdoor bred pigs. So standards and certification is probably the main way of ring fencing what we do in terms of our supply and the insurance behind it. We do have within dairy our own dairy group. That's just over 140 farmers. So they represent around 90% of all the milk we sell. So as a convenience retailer, predominantly we over-index on milk. So we'll sell more market share milk than our market share represents, just by the very nature of being a convenience store. So yeah, assurance is probably the start, but I think we're getting into an area now with sustainability where assurance schemes probably haven't caught up yet to sustainability and the challenges within the UK. Probably not similar, very different to what's seen in Ireland with Bord Bia. So there is a lot more now of ourselves and other companies looking at what we do to drive more on sustainability within our supply chains.
And as ever, incentives help. And earlier this year, Co-op announced a £820,000 fund to support sustainable farming efforts from their producers in reducing carbon emissions and promoting nature on their farms across beef, lamb and dairy. So how is that working in practice? How are you spending the money?
Not fast enough for farmers, probably. In terms of how we're spending it, so that is split across beef, lamb and dairy. Again, co-op, the name is kind of a hint, we are cooperative. So they're probably one of the largest world, not your food cooperatives, retail cooperatives. So it is about working together. So on the beef and lamb, that is working with our supplier, which is Dumbia. That is rewarding farmers who have lowered their emissions and giving them a financial reward. But also what it shows is demonstrates to the industry, we do have a challenge around data. It shows that if you are part of this work with the retail or with your supplier or your processor, measuring your footprint and making improvements, you can get a reward for that. So that's a fairly simple program. And then on dairy, we're actually starting going down the route of some of this benchmarking around soil, nature, water, as well as actions on farm and carbon. So again, that's a payment. That will be a payment to our farmers for being part of that. I think the big change in UK and the UK landscape, which is probably slightly different from Ireland. The way the industry is at the moment, the kind of attitude within the industry is probably not the best place. It's probably an easy way of putting it. And the extra requirements that are coming on farmers, there needs to be a benefit for them, but also a bit more of a support where you can from within the supply chain. So that's what we're trying to do. Doesn't solve all problems, but it's starting to acknowledge some of the costs and some of the challenges farmers need to address the issues they're facing.
And I'd be interested to know what the role of technology is playing on the farms that you work with. How does exposing farmers to the latest technologies, assessing their individual needs and challenges, and identifying tech solutions feature in your role, if at all? And it'd be interesting to hear your insights into the degree to which the myriad of agri-tech solutions being developed out there are actually meeting farmers' needs in practice, and how do farmers navigate everything that's out there?
I think Brendan's point was a good one. It's not the technology isn't their issue at the moment, it's the adoption. I'd also say is I think there isn't a week go by where someone has told me they've found the solution to all my problems, and I get a LinkedIn message just to do X and it'll solve everything. Adoption is the biggest problem. Also, being kind of completely honest with our sustainability and the grants, I focus on rewarding the farmers, not rewarding companies to start with, because that's where the drive needs to be seen. And also kind of showing farmers where they make those investments, they can get the reward back. So I think it's adoption. Yes, technology is a key part of that. I think it's the challenges around not all solutions are based with farmers in mind. Also, everybody has an app. And I know it sounds very simple and pragmatic, but if every farm adopted every bit of technology that was supposed to help and save them, they'd probably have 100, 1,000 apps on their phone. So again, I think the challenge with the adoption is, as an industry, that's a royal we're not very good at one platform for a number of different services and systems, linking tech together, having it simple for a farmer to use, because we do design stuff from the one user, as in just to solve one problem, but farmers have a myriad of challenges and there's a myriad of issues they're trying to address. So I think that sometimes is that is also I call it the hassle factor, for want of a better description. If it feels like a lot of hassle, despite how much money you say it might save them, that can be a barrier. And the example I use is I can give everyone, well, if you're based in the UK anyways, 250 quid tomorrow, just change your bank account. But we don't do it because sometimes it's a hassle of doing that every year. So yeah, we expect farmers to be different. So I do think that sometimes is the adoption challenge it's the hassle. It's also understanding who makes those decisions on farms, but who actually wants to engage with the technology as well. So it just depends on what it is.
Yeah, and as you know, I have the pleasure of working with a wide range of agri-tech and machinery companies from Ireland who are exporting their products and solutions to the UK or are looking to do so in the future. I'm always impressed to the degree to which Irish agri-tech and machinery is grounded in addressing on-farm challenges. Maybe there is a job of work to do about data integration and that kind of thing. Do you have any advice to my clients as to how they could look to engage the likes of Co-op who are guiding and influencing farmers' sustainability efforts, or the Farmers Direct for that matter?
To be honest, I think Brendan's advice is probably more salient than mine in terms of the groundwork. What I will say for Irish companies, don't come to the UK and expect it to be Ireland, just a bit bigger. The landscape is different. Government level engagement is different, or should I say, probably lack thereof compared to Ireland. The landscape is highly more stratified. You have basically Teagasc, 3 or 4 different research places in Ireland, UCD and a few others. You've probably double, triple the amount in the UK. So you have to kind of know where you want to target and what you want to do. In terms of retail, sometimes there's a bit of luck with it. If I happen to be on a project that needs a solution and you happen to come across me at the right time, that might work. Other times I'm getting, more often than not, I think the challenge we have in retail is people see retailers as in just pots of money. It isn't the case. And that we can drive all the change. And also sometimes it's a very niche solution to a very niche problem, whereas my role is to look at the whole challenges and how do we move everything forward. So I think you can't underestimate the groundwork. I also say is, for me, I personally don't do anything unless I have the support and can work with our processors or suppliers with it. Yes, I have a relationship with farmers, but most of my relationship is with our supplier. They are the ones that have to coordinate, have to balance supply, have to have that engagement, and have to have that long-term relationship with the farmer. You know, there's no point in me offering a solution if our processor can't make it work within their business as well. So I think that I wouldn't underestimate the relationship of kind of suppliers, and actually that's another big change we've seen in the last few years. My climate change targets are not just mine, they're my supplier. They have to reduce their emissions as well. It's not just a retail want or a retailer wants this. If you're a business, all of our suppliers or majority have signed up to science-based targets. So their reduction targets are our reduction targets. There's not we're only doing this for one retailer over there. It's pretty much everyone is trying to move in the one direction.
Yeah. Now I know you're in high demand and I need to let you go, bang on 3:30. So we've achieved that. Thank you so much, Joseph. And thank you so much to the rest of the panel. We will forward on any questions that have cropped up throughout the webinar to you. And thanks to everybody too who has joined the webinar. As I mentioned at the start, a recording will be available, and feel free to send me any questions that you have. Most of you have my email address, jane.lysett@enterprise-island.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. So thanks again all, and that was a great hour spent. Thank you.